Alright, time to review The Forgotten City by Modern Storyteller. Overall, my thoughts are, well, complicated. This is not a perfect game by any stretch of the imagination, and I was thinking, should I couch my review in the fact that the team is really just like a handful of guys working with an extremely limited budget on a pre-existing engine, and really most of what you see in the credits are the voice acting cast? Well, no, because that would be a disservice to bring that up as if that it can excuse a lot of the limitations in the Forgotten City. Now, of course, one would look at a review and say, "Oh, yeah, it's a game that made by 3 people instead of 300. So why would you criticize them just as much as a team of 300? Well, the criticisms are the same. The game, when you play the game, you don't care how many people made it. You care about what you play with, what you see, what you experience. So let's talk about that, at least my thoughts on it. Overall, I think the game is pretty darn good. For what it is, an adventure game, a mystery adventure game with a strong narrative component, and it's based around dialogue and storytelling and the narrative and the plot and the revelations of a mystery. This does a really great job of it, especially in the fact that there are just great, memorable characters. They're all distinct. And the voice acting was fantastic for the vast majority of them. I really cared for a lot of the characters, which is rare in most games. It also has, of course, a great mystery plot that you forge through, revealing hints and revelations at a very good pace. They really paced that out well. The hints they revealed were very well done. The mechanic of the time looping, like reliving the day and being able to take the things that you successfully acquired from the previous day with you, was a great touch to make players not feel frustrated or flustered as they're moving towards revealing the great mystery, which was a great reveal. And there's a lot of ham chewing dialogue that was really great. It's like watching a really fantastic movie, a science fiction movie, one with deep thought, like I'm talking like an Arthur C. Clarke or a Carl Sagan type movie here. It was very well done by Modern Storyteller in that regard. So as a developer called Modern Storyteller, they certainly got the storyteller part down pat in this game, their first game, The Forgotten City. This city itself was beautifully realized. The geography was great. Once you get the hang of it, like in the first day or two, you know where everything is. If you have a good spatial awareness with you, you'll know where everything is. You'll know how to get to everything. You might get thrown a little bit off, but it made sense. It was like I was traveling within an entirely enclosed and enclaved Roman city, like among a canyon, which essentially was what it was. And the architecture is fantastic. The stonework and the brickwork, they really did the developers really did a good job of delving into the history, knowing their history about Roman, design philosophy, not just in the buildings and the plazas and the amphitheaters, but also with the clothing and the vocations that people had and what they had available to them. It was really well done in that regards. The mythology around Roman gods, Greek gods, that's always a treat to see. I always love that stuff. The idea of the Romans basically copying the Greeks and just changing the names around, but not much of anything else. The slight humor in that was appreciated by me as well. A very good game in that regards. But then you have the issues that drag down the game. And most of these issues are technical issues. Now, the artistic design and the level design, the design of the city was very well done. The graphics themselves technically weren't as polished as I'd expect for a game that came out in 2021. It just lacks that polish that you'd see with like filters and enhancements that, if you go into other games, you can turn them on, turn them off, adjust them up to like medium, high, or very high settings, depending on the frame rate you want to get with your hardware. But you just don't have that in this game. You do have the ability to do that in this game, but even on the highest settings, it just doesn't look as sleekly, as polished, and as realistic as many other games, even that came out a few years ago. There's also some technical issues with like stiff animations for sure, poor facial expressions. There were poor loading optimizations of the textures and the draw distance that really dragged down the processor, which it didn't need to. I've got a high-end processor and it didn't need to do that. And that is probably shown in some of my playthrough videos where it just would stagger. It would stagger in the recording of the videos, whereas in much higher end graphical games, like for instance a recent playthrough I did, Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice, which had much more polished graphics and much more demanding graphics, it didn't stutter, not even as close as Forgotten City did. There were also some sound issues that went along with that poor loading optimizations, like static, and also this isn't more so of technical issues, but this is just kind of like scene setup issues. There was at times lack of thinking through scenes and people's actions, like where Equitia announces the election. She just kind of stands at one end of the marketplace and with her very soft voice slightly raises it and says, "Everybody, there's an election," and people that would not even remotely be able to hear her say, "Oh great, the election," and then they go. And there's other things like Sentius knowing about things going on that he'd have to hear it from other people, but it's like he has omniscience. So there was some like omniscience going on where back then, and given what the technology they'd have, communication had to be word of mouth, but somehow a lot of them were omniscient. So there was lack of thinking it through. They could have just plotted it out a little more and spent more time just executing that scene, given the limitations of what the Roman society and the Roman city and the Forgotten City had at the time. So that would have just taken more time, and I don't know why they didn't do that, but that does drag it down ultimately. But ultimately, it's not as great as the previous games other games, but this is a very good job nonetheless. It's quite memorable. That's one of the main things. This is a very memorable game, and it's wanting me to see more of what Modern Storyteller has, especially if their team grows in size into the future, seeing what their next projects are, because I'm sure they have a bright future ahead of them to grow and build even bigger and better stories that are more polished, much more polished. Like my reviews should be much more polished and scripted out, but I'm just doing this off the cuff pretty much. So yeah, if I was to give this a quantitative score, I don't like to. I would give it like about an 80, B+ range if it was a letter grade. The most important thing is this game was certainly worth the time I put into it. Certainly worth the money I spent on it, although I did buy it on deal on Steam for like I think it was like 17 Canadian. So it was certainly worth the time, certainly worth the money. Certainly I will remember this game, The Forgotten City, with fond memories. It just needed much more polish to it, but not in regards to the real nitty-gritty, the crux of what was going on in the game. So I enjoyed it, and I highly suggest others play it as well. So thank you for listening to my review of The Forgotten City, and keep an eye on Acute Obtuse Reflex Gaming channel for the next playthrough. Thank you.